often with channels patched one-to-one typically. So if you've been playing with your console, you may not see the one-to-one patch of channels that I'm showing here, but we'll go through and show you how to get back to the state so that we can all start with the same same setup. Down the bottom we have our command line, which is to the right of where it says live. So the live indicator is obviously showing you a difference between live and blind mode. So if I go blind, it changes to red. Live is green. So any commands are going to appear on there. The options button below live is really where we do sort of operational stuff like creating new shows, saving and loading shows. So if you don't have a one-to-one blank patch like you see on my screen at the moment, go ahead and hit new show in there, and it will probably come up and say, would you like to save changes to what you already have? Just hit no or yes if you want to save your work or something, and it'll go and build a new show file for us. I had my, we're going to get into the options, but I actually did have my system set up to start with a blank patch. That's not probably what your system is set to do. So I'm just going to do this, and we will come back to these options and how all that works. But you'll see in the options menu, you have your options to open a show, save the show as a different name. Now, one thing to be aware of is that the software is always in a saved state. So any changes I make, any cues I record or anything like that there, if I pull the power plug on the console, plug it back in, it's going to come back and the last thing I did will be there. It won't necessarily have saved that to a file, but it will remember where it was, and the state of the system is always there when you restart. So that is both good and bad, in that it's good from the point of view that you don't have to worry about losing work if, you know, something really bad happens. But I do find some customers get themselves into trouble because they rely on that too much and they don't actually ever save their show. They start up the console, they start working on stuff, and then they restart and everything's still there, so it all looks like it's saving for them, and they never actually go and save it to a separate file in the system. So that's sometimes a dangerous thing. So if I go into the save file there, what I'll do is I will save this so that we can go through this process, and I give it a name. Let's call it training 1. Now this is our own sort of open and save and open dialog box that we use. You'll notice there are options down there. Are 3 tabs down the side for saving, and then multiple sort of options in this middle section, and then the files on the right. So let me just talk through these different options that we have. Save show is the most common one. That's where we just want to save a show, and that's your normal operation. Oh, by the way, please interrupt me if you've got any questions or you want to answer anything. Want me to answer anything? Cool. Then we have the second one is save a packed show. So the difference between saving a show and saving a packed show is that a packed show will include all of the setup options, all media files, or any auxiliary files that the system is using related to the show will pack into a single file. So if it's a show that uses a lot of media or something, then the file size will be way bigger. So the danger with saving a packed show is that you get much larger files. But if you have someone who wants to, they programmed a show and they want to take the whole thing and move it over to another console, then saving the packed show can be really useful thing. The third option is saving a template. Now, templates are a relatively new feature in the software and really, really useful for if you're putting the console into something like a school or church or anything like that there. What a template allows you to do is you could, like, for example, set up a patch, set up a layout of how things are going to look, save that as a template, and then when they go and create a new show, the system will give them the option of starting the show from a template, and the template will bring the template in, and then they've started the show with, you know, their basic rig patched and a basic layout. There's also actually a mode you can put the system into. I'll show you the switch later on, where if the software is in what's called basic mode and you have a template saved, then the software will not let them start a blank show. They actually have to select a template. So it's a great way to make sure that if the console's going put into a place and it's got users that are a little bit on the not so experienced side, it's a great way to make sure that they always get something that they know how to work with. So in this case, we're just going to save as training 1. One of the interesting new features again in the software, I think we introduced it in the last version, is cloud storage. So the software can also load and save from cloud to Dropbox, OneDrive, and Google Drive directly. So that's a nice sort of feature of the software. So I'm just going to go ahead and save that as it is, and our name appears just next to the clock there. It's telling me my show name in there. Other options in here we'll come back to depending on time. We'll talk about external triggers, scheduled task, user permission, things like that there. I'll very briefly talk about backups. So the backup system is turned on automatically when we're on a new system, and essentially every so often, I can't remember how often it's set to, every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it will create a backup of the show and store that in a backup folder, and it will roll off the oldest 20th file it will delete, so you have lots of backups in there. And connect to remote, again, we'll talk about that if we have time later on. But the next place I'm going to go to is the system properties. So we can either access it from this menu. It's actually also a button on the main screen here. They both do the same thing. And the system properties is really where all settings for the software are set up. So again, multiple tabs. Some of these I might just go through quickly. So if there's anything in particular that you want me to cover in more depth, then let me know. I can, but I'll probably spend a bit of time on this first tab. This is the input-output tab. This is where we configure getting DMX out of the system. I've got this system set to quite a lot of desk channels. It doesn't need to be that high. I think the default is 500. I've obviously loaded a show file that had more. The reason why that's configurable is simply a resource thing. So if you're running, particularly in the case of like Neo PC, if you're running on a lower spec machine, the fewer channels the system has to process, the better. We've actually just recently upped the maximum limit. I think now is 32,000 channels that the system can handle. And 250 universes is the new maximum. That was actually a recent change. But anyway, it's not something you would typically need to change. You know, as I said, the default is around 500 channels. A 500 channel show is, you know, unless you're dealing with a lot of LEDs, is that 500 channels is more than enough for most. A really useful feature is the ability to merge input and output. So if this is turned on, you'll notice on the back of the console is a DMX input port. You can use that to basically take the input from another console and essentially merge it with the contents of this console. So this allows you to set different merge options, whether it's HT, highest takes precedence, lowest, build. Input takes precedence means that as long as the input is above 0, the input, whatever's coming in on the DMX line, will override whatever's going out on the Neo DMX line. And the last one is an interesting one, desk channels. So what happens there is if it's set to merge with desk channels, it means that if you had, say, a 48 channel fader desk plugged in to the console, then each of the faders would essentially become an intensity level for the channels that you've got patched inside Neo. So say channel 1 was a moving light, then fader 1 on that DMX board that you've got plugged in would become your intensity control for channel 1. So it's a way to get lots of handles, physical handles, to map one-to-one with the channel. So that's quite a useful and common one. So if you select any of the other options, the HTTP, LTP build, ITP, then you also need to set this setting here, which is what universe it's going to merge with. There is a call, or at least a feature that's on the books that we're looking to implement, which is the ability to merge with multiple universes. So actually to receive multiple universes in via something like ArtNet and merge that with multiple universes output. We're getting a bit of call from that from venues where they want to have, like, a Neo is like their main console in the venue, but they know that other users might bring other consoles in, and so they use this as a nice way for them to connect those other consoles in and not mess around with the system they have set up. So that feature may come soon. Then below all of that, we have a table which defines, essentially you can think of it like a routing table, as to the universe of Neo, where that goes. So we have universes 1 to 10, because that's how many universes we defined up here. And for each universe, we can click on the device drop down and we can set what protocol it's going to send, or because we obviously have your PC versions, there's actually also a variety of USB device options as well. In the case of the console itself, people are really going to be mostly thinking about these DMX over Ethernet options. But if you're on Neo PC, then obviously the USB is just as valuable. Then once we've set, so for let's make a change so that we can see. If we decided universe 1 we want to be streaming ACN, we then need to define a port or a universe. So it's quite possible to have universe 1 of Neo going to universe 5 of ArtNet, for example. So that's why you can think of it like a routing table, because you can literally say this universe goes over here within the system. Net interface applies to Ethernet-based options, and it allows us, so if you have multiple network cards on the PC, or in the case of Neo, it has 2 Ethernet output ports, you can define a specific card or network interface that it's actually going to go on. Really, really handy to be able to isolate. And so you have one port is for your general network traffic, what you might be using to manage the console, and then another port is just DMX data. So so we would say, okay, that's the port we want our Ethernet traffic to go on. In the case of streaming ACN, we can't set the frame rate, but if that's possible, then you can set a frame rate for that. Priority, so under streaming ACN, we can set a priority. So if you have multiple consoles talking on the same network, one might be a backup, for example, the priority can determine which console the nodes actually listen to. So a node will be set up to basically listen to the highest priority device it can. So that sort of covers off. There are some advanced settings, such as unicast communication. We can come back to that if you want to, or we can go into that in more detail at another time. So that's sort of our main routing table for output. There's another tab within here called console ports. So this determines what Neo universe is going to go out the 4 ports that are on the back of the console. So again, we can, it comes set up default 1 to 4, but as we've often said, you know, you could use those